Rise and shine, sleepyhead.
Because I am your new spirit guide.
Surprise.
Fix it? You're the reason he escaped.
She's got a point.
Stay out of this. We don't solve anything.
What fun!
There's ever a time to unburden yourself with the truth, now is it.
You'll have nothing left to save.
There'll be a price to pay.
Wednesday. Season 2 is not a theatrical movie, but the second season of Netflix's supernatural mystery series. Wednesday, and before analyzing the story itself, the most important production fact is that Netflix has not publicly released an official production budget for the season, so it would be incorrect to invent a budget figure or present an unofficial estimate as confirmed fact. Unlike a theatrical film, Wednesday Season 2 also does not have a conventional box office gross because it was released as a Netflix streaming series, meaning there is no legitimate worldwide theatrical earnings figure to report. And the correct financial description is therefore that Netflix has not publicly disclosed the season's production budget or a traditional box office revenue total. The season was released in 2 parts, with Part 1 arriving on Netflix on August 6, 2025, and Part 2 arriving on September 3, 2025, completing all 8 episodes of the second season. The story returns Jenna Ortega as Wednesday Addams, the central character whose combination of deadpan humor, intelligence, emotional distance, and fascination with death made the first season such a major success. And Season 2 deliberately expands the world around her rather than simply repeating the structure of the first chapter. Netflix describes the second season as darker and more complex, with Wednesday facing a new supernatural mystery while navigating family, friends, new threats, and old adversaries at Nevermore Academy. This expansion is one of the most important changes in Season 2 because the first season was heavily focused on establishing Wednesday herself, whereas the second season has the confidence to broaden the story and give more space to the Addams family, Nevermore students, teachers, returning enemies, and entirely new characters. The production also moved from Romania, where the first season was primarily filmed, to Ireland for Season 2, with principal photography beginning in May 2024 and continuing for approximately 6 months, primarily at Ashford Studios in County Wicklow, and at locations across Dublin, County Offaly, and County Wicklow. That change in location is not merely a technical detail, because the visual identity of Wednesday is extremely important to the series, and Ireland provides a different kind of Gothic atmosphere through its forests, castles, overcast skies, and historic architecture. The creators specifically described Ireland as a location that fit the sensibility of the series and helped create a distinctive Tim Burton-inspired environment, even though the fictional setting remains Nevermore Academy in Vermont. Tim Burton returns as a director and executive producer, while creators and showrunners Alfred Gough and Miles Miller continue to lead the series, with Paco Cabezas and Angela Robinson also directing episodes. This continuity behind the camera matters because Wednesday has a very specific visual and tonal identity, and Season 2 does not attempt to abandon the gothic comedy, supernatural mystery, and dark character drama that made the first season distinctive. Instead, it increases the scale while keeping Wednesday herself at the center. Jenna Ortega's performance remains the foundation of the series, but her role expanded beyond acting because she also served as a producer during the second season. Netflix's behind-the-scenes material emphasizes that Ortega became more involved in creative discussions, including details involving the look of blood, prosthetics, and the overall presentation of the character and world. That additional responsibility is important because Wednesday Addams is an unusually specific character. She cannot simply be played as a generic sarcastic teenager. Her humor comes from the fact that she treats disturbing subjects with complete seriousness, while her emotional restraint makes even small changes in expression meaningful. Ortega's performance depends heavily on stillness, timing, posture, facial expression, and delivery, and Season 2 continues to use those qualities rather than turning Wednesday into a more conventional emotional protagonist. This is one of the greatest strengths of the season because the character remains recognizably Wednesday even as the world around her becomes larger. She is still intelligent, independent, morbid, suspicious, and socially resistant, but Season 2 gives those qualities new situations in which to operate. The story begins with Wednesday returning to Nevermore after the events of the first season, and the important difference is that she is no longer simply being forced into the school environment. Netflix's own description emphasizes that this is the first time she returns willingly, believing that she understands Nevermore and knows how to operate within its strange social and supernatural environment. That confidence immediately becomes one of the season's targets. Wednesday believes she can control the investigation, predict the people around her, and remain emotionally detached, but the season repeatedly challenges those assumptions. The creators have explained that nothing is what it seems in Season 2, and this becomes a useful description of the narrative because Wednesday begins the season thinking she understands the environment, only to discover that the new mystery is more complicated than she expects. This is an effective continuation of her character because the greatest weakness of an exceptionally intelligent detective is sometimes the belief that intelligence is enough. Wednesday is brilliant at observing other people, but she is less comfortable examining herself. She can identify lies, patterns, motives, and contradictions in other people, yet she has difficulty accepting emotional uncertainty when it involves her own relationships. Season 2 uses that contradiction to develop her character. The central mystery remains important, but the deeper story is about whether Wednesday can continue to grow without becoming a completely different person. That is a difficult balance for the writers because audiences do not want Wednesday to become a typical emotionally expressive teenager. Her emotional distance is part of her identity. At the same time, a character cannot remain completely unchanged for multiple seasons without becoming static. Season 2 therefore develops Wednesday through relationships and consequences rather than simply changing her personality. She remains sarcastic and emotionally controlled, but she is increasingly forced to recognize that other people matter to her, even if she refuses to admit it. Her relationship with Enid Sinclair remains particularly important in this respect. Emma Myers returns as Enid, and the friendship between Wednesday and Enid continues to provide one of the most effective contrasts in the series. Wednesday is dark, restrained, and suspicious, while Enid is expressive, colorful, energetic, and emotionally open. Their differences create humor, but the friendship also functions as a character development mechanism. Enid represents a version of emotional connection that Wednesday cannot completely control. Wednesday may prefer solitude, but Enid has become part of her life, and that means Wednesday can no longer pretend that relationships are irrelevant. The contrast between them is one of the reasons the series remains emotionally accessible. Without Enid, Wednesday could easily become too isolated and repetitive. Enid allows the audience to see the consequences of Wednesday's behavior through someone who reacts to her differently from the average character. Their friendship also demonstrates that emotional connection does not necessarily require Wednesday to become sentimental. She can care about someone while still expressing that care in her own strange way. This is important because one of the biggest risks in developing Wednesday as a character is making her too soft. The writers avoid that by keeping her emotional language unusual. She does not suddenly become openly affectionate. Instead, her relationships reveal small changes in behavior, attention, and loyalty. That makes the character development feel more consistent with who she is. Season 2 also expands the role of Wednesday's family. Catherine Zeta-Jones returns as Morticia Adams, Luis Guzman returns as Gomez Adams, and Isaac Ordonez returns as Pugsley Adams, with the three characters receiving expanded roles and becoming series regulars alongside Wednesday.
At the same time, the series has to be careful not to allow the family to overwhelm Wednesday's story. The title remains Wednesday, and the central character still needs to drive the narrative. The best moments are therefore those in which family conflict reveals something about Wednesday rather than simply becoming a separate subplot. Another major addition is Steve Buscemi as Principal Barry Dort, the new headmaster of Nevermore Academy. Netflix describes Dort as a mysterious figure whose motives are not immediately clear and who has a strong sense of pride in the outcast community. His arrival creates a new authority figure at Nevermore and therefore changes the institutional environment in which Wednesday operates. Principal Dort is important because Wednesday does not respond well to authority, particularly when authority figures attempt to control information. A new principal with secrets creates exactly the kind of situation that naturally attracts her suspicion. The presence of a mysterious headmaster also gives the season another opportunity to use one of its central themes. Appearances can be misleading. Someone can present themselves as a protector while hiding another agenda, and someone who appears threatening may have more complicated motivations. This is the kind of uncertainty that works well with Wednesday's detective personality because she is naturally suspicious, but it also creates a challenge for the writers. If every character is mysterious, the mystery can become predictable. Season 2 therefore has to balance genuinely surprising revelations with the expectation that almost everyone around Wednesday may be hiding something. The expanded cast also includes Steve Buscemi, Billie Piper, Evie Templeton, Owen Painter and Noah Taylor as new series regulars, while guest appearances include Christopher Lloyd, Joanna Lumley, Thandiwe Newton, Francis O'Connor, Haley Joel Osment, Heather Matarazzo, Jonas Suetamo and Lady Gaga. The size of this cast demonstrates how much larger the world of Season 2 has become. Instead of depending almost entirely on the original Nevermore group, the season introduces new adults, students, family members and supernatural figures. That gives the writers more possibilities for mysteries and character conflicts, but it also creates a potential weakness. Too many characters can divide the audience's attention. A mystery series needs enough secondary characters to create uncertainty, but each new character also requires narrative space. Season 2 manages this by keeping Wednesday at the center, although some characters inevitably function more as parts of the larger mystery than as fully developed individual stories. One of the most notable guest appearances is Lady Gaga, who appears in Part 2 as Rosaline Rotwood, described by Netflix as a legendary Nevermore teacher who crosses paths with Wednesday. Her involvement is not merely celebrity casting, it is connected to the mythology of Nevermore and the supernatural world. The addition of a performer with such a strong cultural identity also creates a natural marketing advantage, but the more important question is whether the character contributes to Wednesday's story rather than simply becoming a celebrity cameo. In Season 2, the larger world of Nevermore allows new figures like Rosaline Rotwood to expand the school's history and suggest that Wednesday is only beginning to understand how deep its supernatural legacy actually goes. This expansion is one of the season's biggest narrative strengths. Nevermore no longer feels like a location with a few secrets waiting to be discovered. It begins to feel like an institution with layers of history, personalities and conflicts that existed long before Wednesday arrived. That is important because a mystery becomes more compelling when the location itself feels like part of the mystery. The school becomes almost a character. Its architecture, hidden spaces, traditions, classrooms, forests and surrounding areas all contribute to the atmosphere. The move to Ireland enhances this effect considerably. Season 2's production design and locations create a larger, more cinematic world, with Gothic buildings, forests, historic spaces and elaborate sets giving Nevermore a stronger sense of history. Netflix's behind-the-scenes coverage emphasizes that the production created a full studio environment in Ireland and used the country's natural landscapes and architecture to deepen the visual identity of the series. This visual expansion is especially valuable because Season 1 established a very recognizable aesthetic, and simply repeating that aesthetic could have made Season 2 feel like a larger version of the same story. Instead, the new locations allow the series to explore different shades of darkness. Ireland gives the world a colder, more ancient feeling, and that works perfectly with the supernatural mythology. The forests and castles make the story feel less like a normal school mystery and more like a modern Gothic fairy tale. Tim Burton's influence remains visible, particularly in the combination of strange humor, Gothic design, exaggerated characters and macabre imagery, but the series also has its own identity separate from Burton's individual episodes. The creators and production team understand that the visual style has become part of the Wednesday brand. The black and white aesthetic associated with Wednesday's clothing, the Gothic architecture, unusual creatures, dark humor and stylized horror all work together to create a world that is instantly recognizable. Season 2 increases the scale of that world without abandoning its central visual language. Another important element is the continuation of the supernatural mystery structure. Wednesday is essentially a detective story placed inside a supernatural school. The mystery gives her a reason to investigate, while the supernatural setting provides opportunities for unusual suspects, psychic visions, strange creatures and impossible events. This combination is one of the series' strongest concepts because it allows Wednesday's intelligence to remain useful without making the world completely realistic. Her greatest weapon is observation, but the world around her does not always obey ordinary rules. That creates an interesting conflict between logic and supernatural uncertainty. Wednesday wants to understand everything, but supernatural phenomena often resist simple explanations. Her psychic abilities add another complication. She has access to visions that can reveal information, but visions are not the same as complete knowledge. A vision may show something important without explaining what it means, and this forces Wednesday to interpret incomplete evidence. That makes her investigation more interesting because even supernatural powers have limitations. Season 2 continues to use those abilities while placing Wednesday in situations where she cannot simply rely on a vision to solve the mystery. This maintains the detective element instead of turning her powers into an easy solution. The first season established Wednesday as an amateur detective, and Season 2 develops that identity further by allowing her to approach new mysteries with more confidence. But confidence can become arrogance, and this is one of the character's weaknesses. Wednesday often believes she is the smartest person in the room, and she is frequently correct. The problem is that being correct most of the time can make it difficult to recognize when you are wrong. Season 2 challenges her through situations where her assumptions fail. She returns to Nevermore believing she knows the school, the people and the rules, but the new mystery forces her to recognize that she has only seen one layer of the institution. This is a strong narrative decision because it gives the detective story a personal dimension. Wednesday is not simply investigating a mystery, she is discovering that her previous understanding of her environment was incomplete. That realization forces her to become more adaptable. Adaptability is particularly difficult for Wednesday because control is one of the ways she protects herself emotionally. If she can predict everything, she does not have to deal with uncertainty. If she can investigate every problem, She does not have to admit that some problems are emotional rather than logical. Season 2 repeatedly pushes her toward situations where logic alone is insufficient. She has to trust people, even if she hates admitting it. She has to consider other perspectives, even when she believes she is right. She has to recognize that relationships can be important even when they complicate her plans. These are not conventional emotional lessons, and the writers wisely avoid turning them into sentimental speeches. Instead, they allow Wednesday's actions to reveal her development. This is why Jenna Ortega's performance remains so important. Wednesday's face often communicates what the dialogue refuses to say. A slight change in expression can reveal concern, irritation, surprise or affection without breaking the character's deadpan personality. Ortega's control over the character's physicality allows the show to develop Wednesday without making her unrecognizable. The result is a protagonist who remains funny because she does not understand why other people find her behavior unusual, while also becoming more emotionally layered. This balance is difficult and is one of the major reasons the character continues to work. The series also continues to use humor as a counterweight to horror. Wednesday's jokes are not traditional comedy because she rarely tries to be funny. The humor comes from her sincerity. She can discuss death, violence or disturbing subjects with the same tone another teenager might use to discuss homework. This creates an unusual comedic rhythm because the audience laughs at the contrast between what she says and how seriously she says it. Season 2 preserves this approach while placing her in increasingly absurd situations. The humor is especially effective when it emerges from character differences, such as Wednesday's interactions with Enid, Pugsley, her parents or other students. The dark comedy keeps the season from becoming relentlessly gloomy. This is important because the supernatural mystery can become heavy if there is no tonal variation. Wednesday's deadpan reactions provide that variation naturally. The horror elements also become broader in Season 2. Netflix describes the season as darker and more complex, and the production coverage emphasizes expanded visual effects, prosthetics and supernatural elements. The increased scale allows the series to introduce more unusual creatures and more elaborate supernatural situations, but the key is whether the effects serve the story. Wednesday is not fundamentally a visual effects spectacle. The monsters are important because they reveal something about the characters or the world. The strongest supernatural moments therefore tend to be those that increase mystery or emotional tension rather than existing purely to create spectacle. The VFX and practical effects are most effective when they preserve the strange physicality of the world. The series has always benefited from making supernatural elements feel tactile rather than completely digital, and Season 2 continues that approach through costumes, prosthetics, creature work and set design. This is another area where the expanded production scale becomes noticeable. The world feels bigger, but it still feels handcrafted. The attention to costume and makeup is particularly important because Wednesday's visual identity depends heavily on clothing and silhouette. Her black outfits, pale complexion and controlled hairstyle immediately communicate who she is without dialogue. The other characters are designed to contrast with her, especially Enid, whose colorful appearance provides a visual opposite to Wednesday. That contrast is not merely decorative. It reflects their personalities and strengthens the visual storytelling. Season 2 expands these differences through new characters, family members and faculty, giving the series a wider visual vocabulary. The Addams family itself becomes more visually prominent, with Gomez's iconic pinstripe suit being recreated and Pugsley's clothing designed to contrast with the Nevermore uniform. These details show how much thought goes into maintaining the identity of the franchise. Wednesday Season 2 also benefits from the fact that its creators understand what made the first season successful. The goal is not to reinvent Wednesday completely. The goal is to deepen the existing world. The series therefore preserves the central combination of mystery, fantasy, dark comedy and character-driven drama while increasing the scope. That approach is safer than a complete reinvention, but it also creates a challenge. Season 2 has to offer enough new material to justify its existence. Fortunately, the expanded family role, new Nevermore leadership, new characters, larger mythology and darker mystery provide enough changes to make the season feel like a genuine second chapter rather than an extended continuation of the first. The relationship between Wednesday and Enid remains one of the emotional anchors because their friendship represents something Wednesday cannot easily understand, emotional dependence that is not necessarily weakness. Enid cares openly, while Wednesday cares indirectly. Their relationship demonstrates that people can be different without one person needing to become like the other. This is particularly important for Wednesday because she often treats emotional attachment as a potential vulnerability. Enid challenges that assumption simply by remaining part of her life. Their friendship therefore becomes a quiet argument against Wednesday's belief that isolation is always safer. The series does not need to make Wednesday suddenly affectionate. It only needs to show that she makes choices influenced by the people she cares about. That is enough to demonstrate growth. Tyler Galpin also returns, played by Hunter Doohan, bringing another layer of unresolved history into Wednesday's world. Netflix confirms his return alongside the returning Nevermore characters. His presence is important because the first season left emotional and narrative consequences surrounding him, and a character like Wednesday does not simply forget an unresolved threat. The return of old adversaries creates continuity while allowing the new mystery to interact with the consequences of the previous season. This is another advantage of serialized storytelling. A movie often needs to establish and resolve its central conflict within a few hours, while a series can allow previous events to remain active beneath new stories. Wednesday Season 2 uses that opportunity by bringing back characters and consequences rather than treating Season 1 as completely finished. The result is a stronger sense that the story exists in an ongoing world. This continuity also raises the stakes because Wednesday is no longer investigating mysteries without history. She has already experienced betrayal, danger and loss, and those experiences influence how she approaches new situations. She is more confident, but she is also more aware that people can deceive her. That makes her investigation more cautious in some ways and more reckless in others. She wants answers, and she is willing to take risks to obtain them. The detective side of her personality remains one of the show's most entertaining qualities because she approaches supernatural danger with the same determination another person might use to solve a school assignment. She does not scare easily, and her refusal to behave like a conventional teenager creates many of the season's funniest moments. Yet Season 2 also makes her face a problem that no detective can solve through evidence alone: emotional uncertainty. You can investigate a murder. You can follow clues. You can identify suspects. But you cannot always use logic to determine how another person feels, why a relationship matters, or what you should do when someone you care about is hurt. This is where Wednesday remains vulnerable. Her intelligence gives her power, but it does not give her complete emotional control. The season's strongest character development comes from forcing her to recognize that limitation. She does not become emotionally conventional. Instead, she becomes slightly more aware of the consequences of her choices. That is a much more believable form of development. The second season also benefits from the expanded role of the Addams family because Morticia and Wednesday can now interact more directly inside the Nevermore environment. Their relationship is complicated by similarity. Wednesday often resists her mother because she fears becoming too much like her, yet the more she learns about Morticia, the more she discovers that their similarities are unavoidable. This creates an interesting generational theme. Wednesday's identity is not formed entirely in opposition to her family. She is also shaped by them. The Addams family's unusual values, dark humor and acceptance of eccentricity are part of why Wednesday is able to be so confidently different. Nevermore provides another form of belonging because it is populated by people who are themselves outsiders, but the Addams family remains the original environment in which Wednesday learned that being strange does not necessarily mean being alone. Season 2's expanded family storyline therefore strengthens the emotional foundation of the character. Gomez's role similarly gives the series an opportunity to explore Wednesday's relationship with her father. Gomez is enthusiastic, affectionate and dramatic in ways that contrast sharply with Wednesday's controlled personality. Yet their relationship works because his affection is not dependent on her becoming more conventional. He accepts her strange interests, and that acceptance is one of the reasons Wednesday can remain independent without becoming completely isolated. Pugsley's presence introduces another dimension because Wednesday is no longer the only Addams child at Nevermore. Their sibling relationship can be competitive, protective and uncomfortable in the way sibling relationships often are. The school therefore becomes not just Wednesday's environment but a shared family space. That change allows the series to explore how Wednesday behaves when people she knows from home enter the world she previously treated as her own. This creates new opportunities for comedy as well as conflict. Another major strength of Season 2 is its sense of scale. The first season introduced Nevermore as a mysterious school, but Season 2 suggests a much larger supernatural society surrounding it. New teachers, students, family members and historical figures imply that the world extends far beyond Wednesday's immediate circle. This expansion is essential for a long-running series because a fictional universe needs room to grow. If every mystery happens inside the same small group of characters, the story can eventually feel repetitive. By expanding Nevermore and its history, Season 2 creates possibilities for future stories while still resolving the current season's central conflicts. The broader world also makes Wednesday's role more interesting. She is not simply the smartest person in a small group anymore. She is one individual within a much larger supernatural community, and that community contains people who may be smarter, older, more powerful or more experienced than she is. That challenges her confidence in a useful way. Wednesday is accustomed to being the observer. Season 2 occasionally puts her in situations where she is the person being observed. This reversal creates tension because she is much more comfortable investigating other people than being emotionally or psychologically examined herself. The season's mysteries therefore operate on two levels. There is the external mystery of what is happening at Nevermore, and there is the internal mystery of what Wednesday is becoming. The external mystery can be solved through evidence. The internal one requires self-awareness. This combination is what makes the season more than a supernatural detective story. It is a coming-of-age story disguised as gothic mystery. Wednesday is still growing, even if she would strongly object to the idea. Her development is not about becoming nicer. It is about becoming more capable of understanding the consequences of her actions. That is a subtle but important difference. The show does not need to remove the qualities that make her popular. Her sarcasm, intelligence, darkness and independence remain central. Instead, it adds emotional context. We begin to see that beneath the deadpan exterior is someone who does care, even if she has difficulty expressing that care. This makes her more relatable without making her ordinary. The season's strongest emotional scenes often emerge from this contradiction. Wednesday may say something cruel while doing something protective. She may claim not to care while taking an enormous risk for someone else. She may reject emotional language while expressing loyalty through action. That is exactly how the character should develop. Her love language is not sentimental dialogue. It is behavior. The audience learns to read the difference between what Wednesday says and what Wednesday does. That gap is one of the most entertaining parts of the series. It allows the character to remain emotionally restrained while still giving the audience evidence of growth. The writing also benefits from maintaining the mystery structure because Wednesday's personality is naturally suited to investigation. She asks questions other characters avoid. She notices details other people ignore. She assumes that everyone is hiding something. In an ordinary school, this would make her socially difficult. At Nevermore, it makes her useful. The supernatural environment rewards her suspicious nature. That is why the series concept works so well. Wednesday's personality, which might be considered a flaw in normal society, becomes an advantage in a world full of secrets. Yet Season 2 complicates that advantage by giving her mysteries that cannot be solved through suspicion alone. She has to learn that not everyone who behaves strangely is guilty, and not everyone who appears trustworthy is innocent. This forces her to become a better detective because she cannot rely only on instinct. She needs evidence. She needs allies. She needs to admit when she lacks information. These are difficult lessons for someone who prefers complete control. The season's mystery therefore becomes a test of intellectual humility. Wednesday may be brilliant, but she is not infallible. That makes her more interesting. The visual presentation supports this theme because the world often looks beautiful and threatening at the same time. Ireland's landscapes provide natural Gothic imagery, while the production design creates spaces that feel old enough to contain secrets. The architecture suggests history. The forests suggest hidden danger. The school itself feels like a place where the past has not disappeared. This atmosphere makes the supernatural mystery feel natural within the world rather than artificially inserted. The series does not need to explain why Nevermore feels strange. The environment communicates it. Costume and makeup further reinforce the distinction between characters. Wednesday's monochromatic appearance contrasts with Enid's colorful style. Morticia's elegant Gothic presentation contrasts with Wednesday's simpler darkness, and the new characters introduce additional visual identities. This creates a world where character design functions as storytelling. Before someone speaks, the audience already understands something about their personality. That is one of the strengths of the series' visual language. It also makes the show highly recognizable. Wednesday can often be identified from a single frame because her silhouette, hairstyle and clothing are so distinctive. That visual identity is part of the reason the character has become such a major modern pop culture figure. Season 2 understands that and preserves it while allowing the world around her to become more elaborate. Another important element is the series' ability to combine horror with humor without allowing either to completely destroy the other. If the show became purely comedic, the supernatural mystery would lose tension. If it became purely horror, Wednesday's deadpan humor would lose its effect. The balance between the two is therefore essential. Season 2 continues to use dark comedy as a way to make disturbing events entertaining rather than simply frightening. Wednesday's reactions often reduce the emotional intensity of a frightening situation because she treats it as ordinary. That does not necessarily make the horror less effective. Instead, it creates a unique tone. The audience can laugh at the absurdity while still understanding that the danger is real. This tonal balance is one of the clearest signs that the series knows its own identity. It does not need to become a conventional horror show to become darker. It can increase the stakes while maintaining the humor. That combination allows the season to appeal to viewers who enjoy mystery, fantasy, horror and comedy simultaneously. The expanded supernatural world also gives the series opportunities to explore themes of outsiders and belonging. Nevermore has always been a school for people who do not fit conventional society, and Wednesday's position inside that community is complicated because she is an outsider among outsiders. She does not necessarily want to belong, yet she has found people who accept aspects of her that ordinary society would consider strange. This creates an important thematic contradiction. Wednesday wants independence, but she also benefits from belonging. She wants to be alone, but she has developed friendships. She rejects emotional dependence, but she cares about people. She sees herself as separate from everyone else, yet her actions repeatedly connect her to the community around her. Season 2 deepens this contradiction. As the world of Nevermore expands, Wednesday's position inside it becomes more complicated. She is no longer simply the new girl solving a mystery. She has history at the school, relationships with its students and teachers, and responsibilities that she did not have when she first arrived. The school has become part of her identity, whether she likes it or not. That is a significant character development point because Wednesday's original instinct was to reject every place that tried to define her. Returning willingly suggests that something has changed. She may not call Nevermore home, but she chooses to return. Choice is important. Being forced to belong is different from choosing to participate. Season 2 therefore begins with a subtle indication that Wednesday has already changed because of the first season. She still resists emotional language, but her actions reveal that Nevermore matters to her. The new mystery then tests whether she can protect that world without losing the independence that defines her. This creates a strong central conflict between individuality and community. Wednesday does not want to become ordinary, but she also cannot remain completely isolated. The series' answer is that belonging does not require conformity. She can remain strange while still having relationships. She can remain independent while accepting help. She can remain emotionally reserved while still caring about others. That is the kind of growth that makes the character sustainable across multiple seasons. The second season also succeeds by avoiding the need to repeat the exact emotional structure of Season 1. Instead of simply introducing another monster and another murder investigation with identical character dynamics, it expands the mythology and raises questions about Nevermore itself. This gives the season a broader scope. The mystery is not just about who committed an individual crime, it is connected to the larger history and structure of the supernatural community. That creates more opportunities for world building. The downside of broader mythology is that the story can become more complicated than necessary. More characters, more mysteries and more supernatural rules can sometimes make a narrative feel crowded. The best episodes therefore need to keep the central emotional line visible. Wednesday is investigating something because she wants answers, but the investigation is also forcing her to confront aspects of herself and her relationships. When the mystery becomes disconnected from Wednesday, the story risks feeling like generic supernatural television. When it directly challenges her assumptions, the season becomes much stronger. This is the key to evaluating Season 2. The spectacle is impressive, the cast is larger, the world is darker and the mystery is more ambitious, but the heart of the show remains Wednesday herself. Every new element works best when it tells us something about her. Enid shows her capacity for friendship. Morticia shows her complicated relationship with family and identity. Huxley shows her protective instincts and sibling dynamics. Principal Dort challenges her relationship with authority. New supernatural characters challenge her assumptions about Nevermore. Returning enemies remind her that the past has consequences. Tyler represents unresolved danger. The mystery itself challenges her belief that she can understand everything through intelligence alone. This structure keeps the season coherent despite its expanded scope. Jenna Ortega's performance holds the entire thing together. Her ability to maintain Wednesday's deadpan personality while communicating subtle emotional changes prevents the character from becoming repetitive. The performance is especially impressive because the role depends on restraint. Many actors create character development through increasingly emotional scenes, but Wednesday requires almost the opposite. Ortega often has to show growth through tiny changes while keeping the basic expression and vocal rhythm intact. That makes the performance a form of precision. A small smile can become a major event because the character rarely smiles. A moment of hesitation can reveal uncertainty because she normally appears completely confident. A protective action can communicate affection because she refuses to say it directly. This makes the audience participate in interpreting the character. We learn to read Wednesday's behavior rather than simply listening to her explain herself. That is one of the smartest aspects of the series. The season also demonstrates that Wednesday is not interesting because she lacks emotions. She is interesting because she experiences emotions differently from the people around her. Her darkness is not merely an aesthetic. It is part of how she interprets the world. Death does not frighten her in the same way it frightens others. Social conventions do not impress her. Romantic expectations do not control her. This makes her an outsider, but it also makes her a strong detective because she is willing to examine things other people would rather avoid. Season 2 continues to exploit that advantage while exposing its limitations. Wednesday may be comfortable around death, but she is less comfortable around emotional vulnerability. She may be willing to investigate a dangerous supernatural mystery, but she can struggle with a difficult conversation with someone she cares about. This contrast remains one of the character's greatest strengths. It creates comedy, drama and emotional depth simultaneously. The season's expanded family story also reinforces the idea that Wednesday's darkness is not necessarily a problem that needs to be fixed. The Addams family accepts death, eccentricity and unconventional behavior as normal. Wednesday therefore comes from a family where her strange interests are not considered strange. Her conflict is not simply about becoming more normal. It is about deciding what kind of person she wants to be within a world that contains both people like her family and people like the Nevermore community. That is why the show's theme of outsiders is so important. Wednesday does not need to become an ordinary person to grow. She needs to learn how to exist among other people without sacrificing herself. Season 2's central challenge is therefore not transformation but integration. Can Wednesday remain Wednesday while allowing other people into her life? The answer appears increasingly to be yes. She is still sarcastic. She is still morbid. She is still independent. She is still willing to manipulate situations to get information. But she is no longer completely alone. That is a meaningful evolution. The season's larger production also reflects the growth of the franchise. Wednesday has become more than a small supernatural teen mystery. It is now a major Netflix property with a large international audience, and Season 2 reflects that scale through its expanded cast, locations, production design and mythology. Netflix's own coverage describes the show as a global phenomenon and emphasizes the scale of the second season's production. Yet the series remains strongest when it remembers that its success began with one character. Wednesday did not become popular because the world was enormous. The world became interesting because Wednesday was interesting. Season 2 therefore has to expand without losing that focus. For the most part, the season succeeds because its new elements orbit around her. The mystery gives her something to investigate. Nevermore gives her a setting. The Addams family gives her emotional history. Enid gives her friendship. New enemies give her challenges. New teachers give her authority figures to distrust. New supernatural elements give her a larger world to explore. Everything ultimately returns to the same question. How much can Wednesday change without losing the qualities that make her Wednesday? The answer is that she can change more than she thinks, as long as the change comes through her own choices rather than through pressure to become conventional. That is the most satisfying interpretation of her character development. Season 2 is therefore best understood not as a completely new Wednesday, but as a deeper version of the same Wednesday. She is still the girl who would rather solve a murder than attend a party. She is still fascinated by the macabre. She is still uncomfortable with emotional displays. She is still sarcastic and suspicious. But she is beginning to understand that caring about people does not make her weak. In fact, the willingness to care may be one of the most difficult forms of courage for someone like her. Her intelligence allows her to understand mysteries, but relationships require vulnerability, and vulnerability cannot be solved like a puzzle. Season 2 repeatedly places her in that uncomfortable territory. That is where the series becomes most emotionally interesting. The mystery keeps the plot moving, but the relationships give the mystery meaning. Without the relationships, Wednesday could simply solve another supernatural case. With them, every decision affects people she has come to care about. This creates stakes that are more personal than physical danger. The question is no longer simply whether Wednesday will survive. It is whether she can protect the people around her without destroying the relationships she is trying not to admit she values. That is a much more interesting challenge for the character. It also provides a natural path for future seasons because Wednesday's growth does not need to end. She can remain emotionally restrained while becoming increasingly aware of the impact she has on others. She can remain an outsider while still having a community. She can remain independent while learning when to accept help. Those contradictions are what make her sustainable as a protagonist. Ultimately, Wednesday Season 2 succeeds because it understands that expansion is only valuable when it strengthens the character at the center of the story. The season increases the scale, introduces new mysteries, expands the Addams family, brings new students and faculty into Nevermore, adds major guest stars, moves production to Ireland and deepens the supernatural mythology, but the heart of the story remains Wednesday Addams. The absence of a publicly confirmed production budget means a responsible review should not invent a number, and the absence of a theatrical release means there is no conventional box office total to judge. What can be evaluated is the production ambition, the storytelling, the performances, the visual design and the way the season develops the world established in 2022. On those terms, Season 2 represents a clear expansion rather than a simple repetition. It keeps the dark comedy, supernatural mystery and gothic atmosphere that define Wednesday while pushing the protagonist into a larger and more complicated world. Jenna Ortega remains the central reason the series works, because her interpretation of Wednesday allows the character to develop without becoming unrecognizable. Emma Myers continues to provide an essential emotional contrast through Enid, while Catherine Zeta-Jones, Luis Guzman and Isaac Ordonez give the Addams family a more substantial role. Steve Buscemi adds a new layer of uncertainty through Principal Dort, and the expanded ensemble makes Nevermore feel like a living institution rather than a simple backdrop. The result is a season that understands that the most effective way to make Wednesday's world bigger is not merely to add more monsters, more characters or more locations, but to make every new element challenge something about Wednesday herself. The deeper she investigates Nevermore, the more she discovers that the real mystery is not only what is happening around her but how much she has changed since she first walked through its gates. She may still claim that she prefers solitude, but she has already developed friendships. She may still reject sentimentality, but she has developed loyalty. She may still distrust authority, but she is learning when cooperation is necessary. She may still see herself as an outsider, but she has found a place where being different is normal. That contradiction is the emotional foundation of Wednesday Season 2. The series remains dark because Wednesday remains dark, but the darkness now exists alongside relationships she cannot completely dismiss. The result is a second season that is larger, more ambitious and more deeply connected to the mythology of Nevermore while preserving the strange personality that made Wednesday such a distinctive character in the first place. The most important achievement is not that the season makes Wednesday more emotional, it is that it makes her more understandable without making her ordinary. Her growth comes through action, loyalty, responsibility and uncomfortable encounters with people who refuse to let her remain completely isolated. The mystery gives her a reason to investigate, but the relationships give her a reason to care about what she discovers. And that is ultimately what makes Wednesday Season 2 more than another supernatural school mystery. Beneath the gothic costumes, dark jokes, psychic visions, monsters and murders, it is a story about a young woman who has spent her entire life believing that independence means needing nobody, only to discover that allowing people into her life does not necessarily weaken her independence. Sometimes it gives that independence a purpose. The second chapter of Wednesday becomes even more compelling when the season is examined through the changing relationship between Wednesday Addams and Nevermore Academy, because the school is no longer simply a strange place where an isolated teenager happens to encounter supernatural mysteries. It has become a world that Wednesday has chosen to return to, and that choice reveals more about her character than she would ever openly admit. In the first season, Nevermore was initially an environment that Wednesday resisted, a place she considered restrictive and populated by people she did not immediately trust. But by the beginning of Season 2, the situation has changed because Wednesday returns with greater confidence and a stronger understanding of the school, its students, its traditions and its hidden dangers. This creates a fascinating contradiction at the heart of her character. Wednesday continues to insist that she values solitude, yet she voluntarily returns to a place where she has formed friendships, created enemies, experienced danger and developed a complicated connection to the supernatural community. Her decision to return suggests that Nevermore has become meaningful to her even if she refuses to use conventional emotional language to describe that meaning. This is one of the most effective pieces of character development in the season because the writers do not need Wednesday to say that she misses her friends or that she feels at home. Her actions communicate the change. She comes back because something about Nevermore now belongs to her, and that makes the school itself an extension of her development. The mystery that awaits her is therefore not simply another case. It is a challenge to the version of Nevermore she thinks she already understands. Wednesday arrives believing that her previous experiences have given her enough knowledge to navigate the environment, but the new season quickly establishes that the world is larger, stranger and more dangerous than she imagined. This is an important continuation of the detective structure because the strongest detective stories do not merely ask whether the protagonist can solve a mystery, they ask whether the protagonist is capable of recognizing when their assumptions are wrong. Wednesday is exceptionally intelligent, but intelligence can create its own weakness when it turns into certainty. She often trusts her first interpretation because she is accustomed to being correct, and Season 2 repeatedly places her in situations where that confidence becomes a problem. The mystery therefore works on two levels. On the surface, Wednesday is trying to understand a series of supernatural events and identify the forces behind them. Beneath that, she is learning that intelligence is not the same as complete understanding. There are things she cannot predict, people she cannot immediately read and emotional situations that do not respond to logic. This makes the season more interesting than a simple continuation of the first season's investigation because Wednesday herself becomes part of the mystery. The audience begins to ask not only what is happening at Nevermore but what is happening inside Wednesday as she gradually realizes that her relationships have become more important than she expected. Her friendship with Enid remains one of the clearest examples of this change. Emma Myers continues to play Enid as Wednesday's emotional opposite, and the contrast between the two characters remains one of the series' greatest sources of humor and warmth. Enid is open where Wednesday is guarded, colorful where Wednesday is monochromatic, enthusiastic where Wednesday is skeptical and emotionally expressive where Wednesday often hides behind sarcasm. Yet their differences do not destroy the friendship. Instead, those differences are exactly what make it work. Enid does not need Wednesday to become like her, and Wednesday does not need Enid to become darker. They occupy different emotional worlds while still finding common ground. That makes their friendship more meaningful than a simple opposites attract dynamic. It represents the possibility that people can care about each other without becoming identical. For Wednesday, this is a significant lesson because she often treats similarity as a requirement for trust. She assumes that people who think differently from her are likely to misunderstand her, yet Enid repeatedly proves that someone can be completely different from Wednesday and still understand something essential about her. Enid also functions as a kind of emotional translator. She reacts to Wednesday's actions in ways that reveal what those actions mean to other people. Wednesday may say that she does not care, but Enid notices when she acts protectively. Wednesday may insist that friendship is unnecessary, but her behavior contradicts that claim. This gap between Wednesday's words and actions is one of the most entertaining elements of the series, and Season 2 uses it to show that character development does not require a personality transformation. Wednesday can remain sarcastic, dark and emotionally restrained while becoming more capable of connection. The key is that she begins to understand that connection is not the same thing as weakness. This idea becomes especially important when the larger mystery threatens people around her. In the first season, Wednesday's investigation was partly driven by curiosity and the satisfaction of solving a puzzle, but Season 2 raises the emotional stakes because the people affected by the mystery include individuals she has come to care about. That changes the meaning of her investigation. Solving the mystery is no longer simply intellectually satisfying, it becomes personally necessary. This is a significant evolution because it gives Wednesday an emotional reason to take risks. She may still pretend that everything is about the investigation, but the audience can see that her motivations are becoming more complicated. This also allows the season to explore one of Wednesday's biggest internal contradictions. She wants to believe that she is emotionally detached, but her actions repeatedly prove that she is not. The character's development is therefore not about discovering emotions for the first time. She has always had emotions. The development is about recognizing their existence and accepting that they can influence her choices. This is much more subtle and much more faithful to the character than simply making her suddenly expressive. Jenna Ortega's performance is essential to this process because she has to communicate emotional change while maintaining the controlled exterior that defines Wednesday. The performance often depends on tiny shifts in expression, pauses, changes in posture and subtle alterations in vocal rhythm. A conventional character might announce that they are worried, but Wednesday's version of worry might appear as a slightly longer stare, a moment of hesitation or an unusually direct question. This makes the audience pay attention to details. Because Wednesday rarely shows emotion openly, even a small change becomes significant. Ortega's performance therefore turns restraint into a storytelling tool. The audience learns to read the character through behavior rather than exposition. This is particularly useful in a season where relationships are becoming more important because the emotional story cannot depend entirely on dialogue. Wednesday is not going to give a long speech about how much she cares about someone. She is more likely to take a dangerous action and then deny that it meant anything. That contradiction is part of the character's charm. The season also deepens Wednesday's relationship with her family, and this becomes particularly important because the Addams family is no longer simply an occasional source of humor. Morticia, Gomez and Pugsley become more integrated into the larger narrative, creating new conflicts and new opportunities for character development. Catherine Zeta-Jones's Morticia and Luis Guzman's Gomez provide a fascinating contrast with Wednesday because they are much more openly affectionate while sharing her unconventional worldview. Their relationship demonstrates that the Addams definition of love is unusual but sincere. They do not need to become normal to care deeply about each other. This becomes an important lesson for Wednesday because she has inherited both their darkness and their capacity for attachment. She may resist the idea of becoming like her parents, but she cannot completely escape the values they have given her. Her family has taught her that being different is not a weakness. Nevermore reinforces that lesson by surrounding her with other outsiders. The difference is that Nevermore also teaches her that being different does not mean being alone. This is where the family and school storylines connect. Wednesday's family gives her the foundation for her identity, while Nevermore gives her a community where that identity can exist among other unusual people. Season 2 places these two worlds closer together, and that creates an interesting tension because Wednesday's independence has always been partly defined by her ability to separate herself from her family. Now that family members are more involved in her life at Nevermore, she cannot maintain the same distance. Pugsley's arrival is especially significant because he brings sibling dynamics into the school environment. Wednesday is accustomed to controlling her interactions with other students, but a younger brother creates a different kind of responsibility. She may tease him or treat him with her usual bluntness, but the protective instincts of an older sister become increasingly visible. Again, the character does not need to say that she loves him. Her actions communicate it. This is a recurring principle throughout Season 2. Wednesday's emotional development happens through behavior. The more she cares, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the illusion that she is completely detached. The arrival of new authority figures at Nevermore further challenges her independence. Steve Buscemi's principal Barry Dort represents a new institutional presence, and his mysterious nature immediately creates tension with Wednesday's investigative instincts. A new principal is significant because Wednesday does not like being controlled, and she especially dislikes authority figures who appear to be hiding information. Dort therefore becomes both an institutional obstacle and a potential mystery. His character also expands the world of Nevermore because the school now has a different leadership style and a different set of priorities. Wednesday has to determine whether the new administration can be trusted, and because she assumes that people have hidden motives, even ordinary decisions can appear suspicious to her. This creates opportunities for the season to explore the difference between healthy skepticism and paranoia. Wednesday's suspicion is often justified, but not every strange behavior indicates a conspiracy. A detective who assumes everyone is guilty can eventually miss the truth because they stop distinguishing between evidence and assumption. Season 2 uses this weakness to challenge Wednesday intellectually. She has to learn that being suspicious is useful only when suspicion is supported by evidence. This may seem like a small lesson for such an intelligent character, but it is actually one of the most important aspects of her growth. She has always been good at noticing unusual details. Now she must become better at interpreting them. The new mystery also expands the mythology of Nevermore by suggesting that the school's history is deeper than Wednesday initially realizes. This is a natural progression for the series because Nevermore has always been more than a school. It is a community built around people who exist outside ordinary social structures, and its traditions, teachers and hidden spaces suggest a long history of supernatural events. Season 2 takes advantage of that history by introducing new figures and secrets that connect the present to the past. This gives the school a stronger identity and makes the setting feel like an active part of the narrative. The decision to film Season 2 in Ireland significantly supports this expansion. The locations provide a more ancient and atmospheric visual environment, with forests, historic architecture and Gothic spaces creating a sense that Nevermore belongs to a much older world. The production design is especially important because a supernatural mystery needs locations that feel capable of containing secrets. The architecture should make the audience believe that there are rooms nobody has entered, tunnels nobody has discovered and histories that have been forgotten. Ireland provides that visual foundation naturally, and the production team builds on it through sets, costumes and practical effects. The result is a world that feels larger without losing the intimate atmosphere of the original series. The visual identity of Wednesday remains one of the show's most recognizable strengths. Wednesday herself is still defined by her black and white appearance, while Enid's colorful style continues to create a visual contrast that communicates their personalities before they even speak. This contrast is not merely a fashion choice. It is a visual representation of their emotional differences. Wednesday sees the world through darkness, irony and skepticism, while Enid approaches it with enthusiasm and openness. Their friendship works because the show does not treat one personality as automatically superior to the other. Wednesday's skepticism is useful, but Enid's openness is also valuable. Wednesday's independence protects her, but Enid's willingness to trust people allows her to build relationships. Season 2 continues to show that both approaches have strengths and weaknesses. This is important because the series could easily have turned Enid into nothing more than comic relief. Instead, she remains an important emotional counterweight to Wednesday. Their friendship gives the show warmth without removing its dark tone. The return of Hunter Doohan as Tyler also adds another layer of unresolved tension. Tyler's history with Wednesday means that his presence cannot be treated as ordinary. His return reminds Wednesday that previous mysteries have consequences, and it challenges her ability to trust her own judgment. The first season taught her that people can hide enormous secrets behind familiar faces, and season 2 builds on that lesson. Wednesday now approaches relationships with even more caution, but caution can become isolation if taken too far. The problem is that Wednesday has to determine who deserves trust without becoming incapable of trusting anyone. This is one of the most difficult emotional challenges for a character who prefers certainty. Trust always contains risk. You cannot know everything about another person before deciding whether to trust them. Wednesday wants evidence before emotional commitment, but relationships rarely provide complete evidence. This is why her friendships are so important. Enid, her family and other allies force her to accept uncertainty. She has to act without knowing everything. That is difficult for a detective because investigation is built around gathering information before reaching conclusions. Emotional relationships often work in the opposite direction. You have to make choices while information remains incomplete. Season 2 uses this conflict to deepen Wednesday's character. Her detective skills are not enough to navigate every problem. Sometimes she has to rely on instinct, empathy or loyalty. These are qualities she does not naturally prioritize, which makes them challenging but valuable. The mystery itself also becomes more complex because it is not simply a puzzle with one obvious solution. The season introduces new characters who may be allies, enemies or something in between, and the uncertainty keeps Wednesday moving. The danger of a supernatural mystery is that the rules can become too flexible. If anything is possible, then nothing is surprising because the writers can always invent a new supernatural explanation. Wednesday avoids that problem by keeping the mystery rooted in character motives and consequences. Even supernatural events have to matter to someone. The best mysteries are not simply about discovering what happened. They are about discovering why it happened. Season 2's larger mythology therefore works best when the supernatural elements reveal something about the characters and their relationships. Wednesday's investigation is meaningful because the answers affect people she cares about. This gives the mystery emotional stakes. The supernatural world also allows the series to explore themes that would be difficult to represent in a realistic setting. Psychic visions can externalize intuition. Monsters can represent fear. Strange transformations can reflect identity. Hidden rooms can represent secrets. The Gothic environment allows the series to turn psychological ideas into physical objects and events. Wednesday is therefore not only investigating the supernatural world, she is navigating a symbolic world in which external mysteries often reflect internal conflicts. This is one reason the show remains visually distinctive. It does not separate atmosphere from story. The dark architecture, costumes, creatures and humor all contribute to the same thematic language. The second season's expanded visual effects and creature work also allow the supernatural world to feel more dangerous. The production can create larger threats without abandoning the practical, tactile quality that gives the series its personality. Monsters are not simply digital obstacles. They exist within a world of costumes, makeup, prosthetics and physical sets. This helps maintain the Gothic charm of the series. At the same time, the increased scale can occasionally create the risk of spectacle overpowering character. Wednesday is most interesting when she is investigating a mystery or interacting with another character, not when the show is simply demonstrating how large its effects budget might be. The best use of spectacle is therefore tied directly to emotional stakes. If a supernatural event threatens Enid, Pugsley, Morticia or another important character, the audience cares because the danger affects relationships. If the spectacle exists only because the season needs something visually impressive, it becomes less meaningful. This distinction is important when judging the season as a whole. The expansion is successful when it deepens the story rather than simply making it bigger. Another strength of Season 2 is the continued use of dark comedy. Wednesday's humor remains based on her inability or refusal to respond to situations in conventional ways. She can encounter something terrifying and react with curiosity. She can hear a sentimental statement and respond with an observation about death. She can approach a dangerous situation as if it were an ordinary task. This creates a comedic rhythm that is unique to the character. The humor also prevents the season's darker elements from becoming overwhelming. A gothic mystery with supernatural violence, family trauma and psychological tension could easily become relentlessly serious, but Wednesday's deadpan reactions create breathing space. Enid provides another source of humor through her energetic personality, and the contrast between her and Wednesday creates a natural comedic partnership. Their scenes work because the humor emerges from character rather than from random jokes. Wednesday does not suddenly become a comedian. She remains serious. The audience laughs because her seriousness is applied to absurd situations. This consistency is essential to the show's identity. Season 2 also expands the role of the Addams family in a way that strengthens the comedy. Gomez's dramatic enthusiasm, Morticia's elegant darkness and Pugsley's presence create a family dynamic that is strange but affectionate. Their interactions with Wednesday are funny because they understand her better than most people, yet they also frustrate her in ways only family can. The Addams family's unusual definition of normality remains one of the franchise's greatest strengths. They do not see Wednesday's interests as disturbing. They see them as part of who she is. This gives Wednesday a sense of security that she does not necessarily acknowledge. Her independence is therefore not simply rebellion against her family. It is a complicated mixture of love, irritation, similarity and difference. Morticia and Wednesday are particularly interesting because they share many qualities but interpret them differently. Wednesday fears becoming like her mother, yet she is already influenced by her. Season 2's expanded family presence creates more opportunities to explore that generational relationship. Wednesday is trying to define herself, but she is also discovering which parts of her identity come from the people who raised her. This is a universal coming-of-age theme placed inside a supernatural family. The difference is that the Addams family's values are so unusual that the conflict becomes visually and comedically distinctive. Another major theme in the season is belonging. Nevermore is a school for outsiders, but Wednesday is an outsider even there because she resists the social norms of the outsider community. She does not simply want to be different. She wants to be independent from everyone else. This makes her relationship with Enid particularly meaningful because Enid represents the possibility of belonging without conformity. Wednesday can remain herself while still participating in a friendship. This is a powerful message because belonging is often misunderstood as the need to become like everyone else. Wednesday Season 2 suggests the opposite. You can belong without losing your identity. You can have friends without becoming socially conventional. You can accept love without becoming emotionally dependent. This is one of the reasons the series can function as a coming-of-age story even though it is wrapped in supernatural mystery. The monsters and murders provide the external plot, but the emotional story is about learning how to exist among other people. Wednesday's journey is therefore not toward normality. It is toward self-acceptance. She is learning that her darkness is not something she needs to eliminate. She simply needs to understand how that darkness affects other people. That is a more nuanced form of growth. The season also explores the idea that intelligence can be both a gift and a barrier. Wednesday is often the smartest person in the room, and her ability to observe details allows her to solve problems others cannot. But intelligence can also become a form of emotional defense. If you can turn every problem into a puzzle, you do not have to confront feelings directly. Wednesday's detective instincts allow her to analyze people without necessarily connecting with them. Season 2 challenges this habit by placing her in situations where analysis is not enough. She has to participate emotionally. She has to trust. She has to recognize that sometimes people need understanding rather than solutions. This is difficult for her because her instinct is to solve. If Enid is upset, Wednesday may want to identify the cause and eliminate it. If a family member is in danger, she may focus on the tactical solution rather than the emotional consequences. But relationships are not puzzles with single answers. People can remain hurt even after a problem is solved. Someone can forgive you without forgetting. Someone can love you while disagreeing with you. Someone can be important to you without behaving exactly as you expect. Season 2 uses these complexities to make Wednesday's emotional growth more believable. She does not suddenly understand everyone. She simply begins to recognize that not everything can be solved through deduction. This is also why the season's mystery can function as a metaphor for adolescence. Growing up means realizing that the world is not as predictable as you once believed. Parents do not know everything. Friends can change. People can surprise you. Your own feelings can surprise you. The person you thought you understood may reveal something unexpected. Wednesday experiences these discoveries through supernatural mysteries, but the emotional lesson is universal. Her world becomes more complicated because she is becoming more aware of its complexity. That is a sign of growth, not failure. The first season gave her a clear goal: solve the mystery. The second season gives her a more difficult task: understand the consequences of what she discovers. This is why Season 2 feels more mature. The stakes are not only about identifying the villain. They are about understanding what happens after the truth is revealed. A mystery can be solved, but relationships still have to continue. A threat can be defeated, but emotional consequences remain. A secret can be exposed, but trust may not return immediately. Wednesday is learning that solving the case is not necessarily the end of the story. This is a significant evolution for a character whose natural instinct is to move on to the next mystery once the puzzle is complete. The season forces her to remain present after the answer is found. That is emotionally difficult because consequences cannot be escaped through investigation. This also explains why the supporting cast matters so much. The relationships give the mystery a lasting impact. If Wednesday solves a case and nobody she cares about is affected, the solution is intellectually satisfying but emotionally empty. When the people around her are involved, every clue carries more weight. This is especially true of Enid because their friendship has become one of the emotional anchors of the series. Wednesday's choices can now affect someone she genuinely values. That changes the meaning of risk. She is no longer risking only herself. She is risking the safety and trust of people she cares about. This is a major step in her development. The season also continues to use the Addams family to demonstrate that affection can take many forms. Gomez's love is expressive. Morticia's love is elegant and intense. Pugsley's relationship with Wednesday is sibling-based and sometimes competitive. Wednesday's own love is indirect. None of these forms is treated as automatically wrong. The family accepts difference, and that acceptance is one of the series' most important themes. Wednesday does not need to become emotionally conventional to be loved. This is an important message for anyone who has ever felt different from the people around them. Belonging does not require pretending. It requires finding people who can accept the real version of you. Nevermore is built around this principle. Its students are outcasts, but they are outcasts together. Wednesday's challenge is accepting that she is part of that community whether she likes the label or not. The season's larger world therefore makes her identity more complicated. She is an Addams, a Nevermore student, a friend, a detective and an outsider. None of these identities completely defines her. The more she grows, the more she learns to hold multiple identities at once. This is one of the strongest themes in the series because adolescence is often the process of discovering that you do not have to choose one version of yourself. You can be intelligent and emotional. You can be independent and connected. You can be strange and still belong. Wednesday's development reflects that complexity. The season does not need to make her less dark. It needs to make her more complete. That is exactly what the best moments of Season 2 accomplish. The production also supports this thematic expansion by making the world feel more lived in. The larger sets, new locations, costumes and visual effects create a sense that Nevermore has a history beyond the immediate plot. This matters because a fictional world becomes believable when it appears to continue outside the frame. The audience should feel that students lived there before Wednesday arrived and will continue living there after she leaves. Season 2's expanded mythology helps create that impression. New teachers have histories. New students have relationships. The Addams family has its own past. The school has traditions. The supernatural community has rules and conflicts. This makes the series feel less like a collection of isolated mysteries and more like a coherent universe. That coherence is important for future storytelling. It means later seasons can explore different corners of the world without having to invent everything from scratch. At the same time, the season needs to avoid over-explaining its mythology. Mystery works partly because some things remain unknown. Wednesday does not need every question answered immediately. In fact, her curiosity is more compelling when there are questions she cannot solve quickly. Season 2 understands this by keeping certain elements ambiguous long enough to maintain tension. The audience is encouraged to investigate alongside Wednesday, looking at clues and trying to determine which characters can be trusted. This creates the interactive quality of a mystery series. The viewer becomes a detective too. The best episodes allow the audience to form theories and then challenge those theories. This is particularly effective because Wednesday herself is not always reliable as an interpreter. She can make incorrect assumptions, and watching her revise those assumptions keeps the mystery unpredictable. The season therefore avoids making its protagonist omniscient. She is brilliant, but she is still capable of being surprised. That vulnerability is necessary for suspense. If Wednesday knew everything from the beginning, the mystery would have no tension. Her uncertainty makes the investigation more engaging. The season's darker tone also works because it is tied to consequences. Darkness is not simply a visual style. Characters can be hurt, relationships can change. Secrets can have real effects. The supernatural world can be dangerous. This gives the mystery weight. At the same time, the series never abandons its sense of fun. The balance between danger and humor remains essential. Wednesday can be surrounded by darkness without the show becoming hopeless. The Addams family's philosophy is part of the reason. They treat death as natural, which means the series can discuss frightening subjects with a strange sense of acceptance. Wednesday does not fear the dark because the dark is her normal environment. This turns the traditional horror protagonist model upside down. Instead of a character learning to overcome fear of darkness, Wednesday is already comfortable in it. Her real challenge is learning to navigate the light, meaning social connection, trust, vulnerability and emotional uncertainty. This is a clever reversal. The supernatural threats may be frightening to everyone else, but emotional closeness is often more frightening to Wednesday. That makes her relationships more important than the monsters. The monster can be defeated with strategy. Emotional vulnerability cannot. This is why Enid, Morticia, Gomez, Pugsley and other characters are essential. They challenge Wednesday in ways that supernatural enemies cannot. They force her to confront the part of herself she would rather ignore. That is the real emotional conflict of the season. The external mystery is dangerous, but the internal mystery is personal. Wednesday has to discover whether she can remain independent while allowing herself to care. The answer is not to eliminate independence but to redefine it. True independence is not the refusal to need anyone. It is the ability to choose relationships without losing yourself. Season 2 gradually moves Wednesday toward that understanding. She is still not conventional. She still prefers solitude. She still speaks in dark jokes. She still trusts herself more than most people. But she is beginning to recognize that relationships can strengthen rather than weaken her. This is the most important character development in the season. It also provides a foundation for future stories because Wednesday can continue to investigate mysteries while becoming more emotionally aware. The series does not need to sacrifice one side for the other. The detective and the person can develop together. That balance is what makes Wednesday such a durable character. She can be both a gothic icon and a teenager trying to understand herself. She can be terrifyingly intelligent and emotionally inexperienced. She can be independent and still care deeply. She can reject normality while still searching for belonging. These contradictions are the heart of the character. Season 2 succeeds when it embraces them rather than trying to resolve them too quickly. The expanded cast, larger mythology and darker mystery all work best when they reflect those contradictions. The school is both a home and a place of danger. The family is both comforting and irritating. Friendship is both a source of strength and a potential vulnerability. Intelligence is both a gift and a barrier. Independence is both freedom and isolation. Love is both powerful and frightening. These oppositions give the season its thematic depth. Wednesday is constantly forced to choose between two things she once believed were mutually exclusive. She can be independent and connected. She can be dark and caring. She can be intelligent and uncertain. She can be an outsider and still belong. That is what growing up looks like in this world. The supernatural elements simply make those emotional contradictions visible. The result is a season that feels larger but still recognizably Wednesday. Its success depends on maintaining the balance between mystery, horror, comedy and character development, and the strongest episodes achieve that balance by making the external story matter to the internal one. The mystery is not important simply because something dangerous is happening at Nevermore. It is important because what happens forces Wednesday to confront the people and relationships she has spent much of her life avoiding. The deeper she investigates, the more she has to acknowledge that she is no longer the same isolated girl who first arrived at Nevermore. She has connections now. She has history. She has people who care about her. She may continue to deny that those things matter, but her actions increasingly reveal the truth. That is the central emotional achievement of Season 2. Wednesday does not lose her identity. She discovers that her identity is bigger than she thought. She can still be the darkest person in the room and still be someone who cares. She can still love mysteries and still value friendship. She can still reject conventional emotional expression and still experience genuine attachment. The season's larger world gives her room to discover these contradictions. Nevermore is no longer simply the place where she solves mysteries. It is the place where she learns what it means to belong without becoming ordinary. And that is ultimately why Wednesday Season 2 works as a continuation. It understands that the audience does not want Wednesday to become a completely different person. They want to see more of the person she already is, including the contradictions that make her fascinating. The season gives her larger mysteries, stronger threats, deeper family involvement, new relationships and more complicated consequences, but it keeps the emotional focus on the same fundamental question. How can someone who has spent her entire life protecting herself through isolation learn that connection can be another form of strength? Season 2 does not answer that question through a sentimental transformation. It answers it through actions, choices and consequences. Wednesday continues to walk through darkness, but she is no longer walking completely alone. And perhaps the most important development of all is that she is beginning to understand that allowing someone to walk beside her does not mean giving up control of the road. The deeper Wednesday moves into the second season, the more clearly the story reveals that its real subject is not simply supernatural danger but the complicated process of discovering what happens when a person who has built an identity around isolation begins to form genuine attachments, because Wednesday Addams has always treated independence as a kind of armor, and Season 2 repeatedly places pressure on that armor until the audience can see the person underneath it without requiring her to abandon the qualities that made her distinctive in the first place. Her return to Nevermore is therefore more important than it initially appears, because returning voluntarily means that the school has crossed an invisible boundary in her mind. It is no longer merely a place she was forced to attend, but a place connected to her own history and to people whose presence now matters to her. Wednesday would probably reject that interpretation if anyone said it aloud, but her behavior communicates it more clearly than dialogue could. She has memories at Nevermore, unfinished relationships, unresolved mysteries and a growing sense of responsibility toward people she once considered temporary acquaintances. This makes the second season fundamentally different from the first because Wednesday is no longer entering an unknown environment as a complete outsider. She is returning to a world where she already has something to lose. That single change increases the emotional stakes of every mystery. When Wednesday investigates danger during the first season, curiosity and self-preservation are major motivations, but by the second season, investigation increasingly becomes connected to loyalty. She may still describe her actions as intellectual exercises, but the audience understands that her reasons are becoming personal. This contradiction is one of the most effective features of the character because Wednesday's words and actions rarely agree completely. She can insist that she does not need friendship while risking herself for Enid. She can claim that family involvement is inconvenient while becoming visibly protective when Pugsley is threatened. She can dismiss emotional attachment as a weakness while continuing to return to the people who have become important to her. Season 2 understands that the best way to develop Wednesday is not to make her suddenly expressive but to make her choices increasingly reveal what she refuses to say. Jenna Ortega's performance remains crucial because the character's emotional vocabulary is based on restraint. Wednesday's face is often nearly motionless, her voice remains controlled and her posture communicates confidence, but those very limitations make small changes significant. A slight hesitation can indicate uncertainty. A longer look can indicate concern. A decision to remain beside someone can communicate more affection than a conventional declaration of love. This makes the audience an active participant in interpreting Wednesday. We are constantly reading between the lines, comparing what she says with what she does and recognizing that her emotional development happens in small increments. The performance would not work if Wednesday became openly sentimental, because that would destroy the tension between her personality and the people around her. Instead, Season 2 allows her to become more emotionally aware while remaining unmistakably Wednesday. This is a much more difficult form of character development than simply changing a personality, and it is one of the reasons the second season remains engaging even when the supernatural mystery becomes more complicated. The central mystery is important, but Wednesday herself remains the most interesting mystery in the series. She understands other people more easily than she understands herself, and that imbalance creates much of the season's drama. She can observe a stranger's behavior, identify inconsistencies and construct theories from tiny details, but when the subject becomes her own emotions, her analytical skills become less reliable. She cannot simply gather evidence and determine exactly why she cares about someone. She cannot solve loneliness through deduction. She cannot eliminate fear by proving that the fear is irrational. She cannot guarantee that a friendship will remain unchanged. These are experiences that require vulnerability rather than intelligence, and vulnerability is the one area where Wednesday remains inexperienced. Season 2 uses this weakness to push her beyond the comfort zone created by her detective abilities. She is still an investigator, but she increasingly discovers that the most difficult problems are not always the ones with hidden clues. Sometimes the problem is simply accepting that another person has feelings that she cannot control. This is especially important in her relationship with Enid, because Enid represents an emotional connection that Wednesday did not plan. Their friendship grew out of circumstances, but it eventually became something neither character could easily dismiss. Enid's importance to Wednesday is demonstrated not through sentimental speeches but through the way Wednesday responds when Enid is threatened, hurt or emotionally distant. This is the language the show uses to communicate their friendship. Enid is expressive enough to say what she feels, while Wednesday is not, so the emotional tension often comes from the contrast between them. Enid wants reassurance, while Wednesday offers action. Enid wants emotional clarity, while Wednesday offers blunt honesty. Enid may interpret silence as rejection, while Wednesday may interpret silence as normal. These differences create conflict, but they also create growth because each character has to understand a form of communication different from their own. Enid learns that Wednesday's emotional restraint does not necessarily mean a lack of care, while Wednesday learns that caring about someone sometimes requires communicating that care in a way the other person can understand. This is a mature relationship lesson hidden inside a supernatural teen series. It is not enough to feel something internally. Relationships require some form of communication, even if that communication looks different for different people. Wednesday's challenge is therefore not learning to become Enid. It is learning to meet Enid somewhere in the middle without surrendering her own identity. Their friendship works because neither character completely transforms into the other. Instead, they learn to coexist across differences. This theme becomes even more meaningful because Nevermore itself is a community of outsiders. The school is built around people who do not fit conventional society, but even among outsiders there are differences. Wednesday is not automatically comfortable simply because everyone around her is unusual. She still wants to remain separate. This creates one of the central tensions of the season: belonging versus individuality. Wednesday has always believed that being independent means not needing anyone, but Season 2 gradually suggests that this definition of independence is incomplete. A person can choose relationships without surrendering autonomy. A person can accept help without becoming dependent. A person can care deeply without losing the ability to make their own decisions. Wednesday's growth comes from discovering that connection does not necessarily weaken individuality. In fact, the right relationships can make individuality stronger because they provide a secure environment in which a person does not have to pretend. Nevermore becomes meaningful to Wednesday precisely because she can remain strange there. The school does not require her to become normal. Instead, it gives her a community where her darkness is understood as part of her identity. This does not mean Wednesday suddenly enjoys school life in a conventional sense. She still finds most social rituals irritating, still distrusts authority and still prefers investigating mysteries to attending ordinary activities. But the difference is that she now has people within that environment who understand her. That changes the emotional meaning of the school. Nevermore is no longer just a setting. It becomes a place where Wednesday's identity is tested and accepted simultaneously. The expanded role of the Addams family strengthens this theme because Wednesday's relationship with her family provides another model of belonging. The Addamses are strange by ordinary standards, but within their family, their strangeness is normal. Morticia, Gomez and Pugsley do not ask Wednesday to become conventional. They accept her darkness because it is part of their shared identity. This creates an interesting contrast with Nevermore. At home, Wednesday belongs because she is an Addams. At Nevermore, she belongs because she is an outsider among outsiders. These forms of belonging are different, but both are important to her. Season 2 places the two worlds closer together, making it harder for Wednesday to keep them separate. This creates opportunities for comedy because Wednesday often prefers to maintain control over her environment, while her family has a habit of entering her life with enormous emotional energy. Gomez's enthusiasm, Morticia's elegance and Pugsley's presence all challenge Wednesday's desire for emotional distance. Yet their presence also reminds her that she is not as alone as she sometimes imagines. The Addams family may be unconventional, but their affection is remarkably consistent. This is one of the most interesting paradoxes of the franchise. The family looks macabre and strange from the outside, but internally it is deeply loyal. Their love is not ordinary, but it is sincere. Wednesday's own approach to relationships follows the same pattern. She does not express affection in conventional ways, but once someone becomes important to her, her loyalty can become extremely strong. This makes her relationship with her family an important foundation for understanding her relationship with Enid and others. She has learned from the Addamses that love does not have to look normal to be real. The second season therefore does not need to teach Wednesday how to love. It needs to teach her how to recognize and manage the love she already feels. That is a subtler and more interesting journey. Her mother Morticia becomes especially significant in this context because Wednesday's relationship with her is based partly on similarity and partly on resistance. Wednesday wants to define herself as an individual, but she cannot escape the fact that many of her traits are connected to her family. Morticia understands the world in ways Wednesday sometimes does not want to acknowledge, and this creates tension between them. At the same time, Morticia's presence provides Wednesday with an example of what it means to be powerful, elegant, confident and emotionally connected without becoming conventional. Their relationship therefore becomes part of Wednesday's identity struggle. She is not simply asking whether she wants to be like her mother. She is deciding which parts of her inheritance she wants to keep and which parts she wants to redefine. This is a universal coming-of-age conflict presented through the exaggerated world of the Addams family. Teenagers often define themselves partly by separating from their parents, but separation does not mean complete rejection. As people mature, they often begin to recognize that identity can contain elements inherited from family without being controlled by family. Wednesday's story reflects that process. She is becoming her own person while still carrying the influence of the people who raised her. The presence of Gomez and Pugsley adds another layer because family is not simply a source of conflict. It can also be a source of protection. Wednesday may complain about their involvement, but she does not want them harmed. Her willingness to protect them reveals the emotional side of her character more clearly than any speech could. Pugsley's role is particularly interesting because sibling relationships often expose parts of a character that friendships do not. An older sibling may be sarcastic or impatient but still react immediately when the younger sibling is threatened. Wednesday's relationship with Pugsley allows the series to show that her protective instincts are not limited to Enid. She is capable of deep attachment within the family as well. This creates continuity between her home life and school life. The people she cares about may be different, but her instinct to protect them is consistent. That consistency helps the character feel psychologically believable. Another important change in Season 2 is the arrival of new authority figures and new institutional pressures. Steve Buscemi's principal Barry Dort represents a different kind of challenge from the villains Wednesday encountered previously. He is not simply a monster or a supernatural enemy, he is an adult in a position of authority, and authority is something Wednesday naturally distrusts. This makes the relationship interesting even before the mystery develops. Wednesday does not respond well to being told what to do, especially when she believes that the person giving the instructions is withholding information. Her instinct is to investigate rather than obey. This can be useful when authority is corrupt, but it can also create unnecessary conflict when cooperation would be more effective. Season 2 uses this tension to examine the limits of rebellion. Defying authority can be courageous when authority is wrong, but automatically rejecting authority can become another form of rigidity. Wednesday has to learn to distinguish between the two. This is another example of how the season develops her without changing her personality. She remains rebellious, but she becomes more strategic. She does not necessarily stop questioning authority. She becomes better at deciding when to question and when to cooperate. This is an important distinction for a detective because investigation depends on understanding systems as well as individuals. Nevermore is an institution, and institutions have rules, histories and power structures. Wednesday's investigation increasingly requires her to understand those structures. The mystery therefore expands from individual behavior to institutional history. That makes the school itself a more important part of the story. The architecture, traditions and hidden spaces of Nevermore become clues in a larger narrative. The location has memory. Every old building can contain a secret, every abandoned room can suggest a forgotten story and every tradition can have an origin that matters. This is where the Irish filming locations become particularly valuable. The natural landscape gives the series a sense of age and atmosphere that supports the idea that Nevermore has existed for generations. Forests and historic buildings make the supernatural world feel rooted in history rather than invented solely for the current plot. The visual atmosphere also reinforces the show's gothic identity. Wednesday's black clothing stands out against old stone, dark forests and dramatic architecture, creating a visual connection between character and environment. She looks like she belongs in the world even when she insists that she does not. This is an important visual contradiction. The character who claims to be an outsider visually appears perfectly suited to Nevermore. Her aesthetic, personality and interests fit the school's environment so naturally that her resistance to belonging becomes almost ironic. Season 2 plays with that irony by making her return willingly. The school may not be a traditional home, but it has become a place where she fits. This is one of the quietest but most meaningful changes in her character. The mystery also gives her a reason to remain engaged. Wednesday is most comfortable when she has a problem to solve. A mystery provides structure. It gives her something objective to focus on when emotions become confusing. This is why detective work can function as an emotional defense mechanism. Instead of asking herself how she feels, Wednesday asks what happened. Instead of discussing fear, she searches for evidence. Instead of confronting uncertainty, she builds theories. This strategy works remarkably well until the problem becomes personal. Then the detective method reaches its limits. Season 2 repeatedly places Wednesday at that boundary. She can investigate external events, but she cannot investigate her way out of emotional vulnerability. She has to experience it. This creates a subtle tension between plot and character. The mystery pushes the story forward, while the relationships slow Wednesday down and force her to confront feelings she would rather ignore. The best moments of the season are those where the two elements intersect. A clue can reveal something about a relationship. A supernatural threat can expose a personal fear. A family secret can change Wednesday's understanding of herself. This is how the season avoids becoming a collection of unrelated subplots. The external mystery and internal character story are connected. The audience wants to know what is happening, but we also want to know what Wednesday will do when the truth affects someone she loves. This creates emotional suspense in addition to narrative suspense. The return of Tyler is important for the same reason. His presence is not simply a reminder of an old villain. It forces Wednesday to confront the consequences of trusting someone in the past and the difficulty of deciding whether a person can change. Trust becomes one of the season's central themes. Wednesday has learned that appearances can be deceptive, but she has not yet learned how to rebuild trust after betrayal. This is difficult because trust is not a logical calculation. You cannot know with absolute certainty whether someone deserves another chance. You have to decide based on incomplete information. For a character who wants evidence before acting, that is deeply uncomfortable. Tyler's return therefore challenges her detective instincts in a different way. She can investigate his behavior, but even a perfect investigation cannot guarantee what someone will choose to do next. People are unpredictable. They can change. They can lie. They can regret. They can manipulate. Wednesday has to make decisions in a world where certainty is impossible. That is a crucial part of growing up. The world cannot always be reduced to good people and bad people. Some characters are complicated. Some people make terrible choices and later regret them. Some people can be both sympathetic and dangerous. Season 2 benefits when it allows those complexities to exist rather than simplifying everyone into heroes and villains. This is particularly important for a series built around outsiders because outsiders are often defined by their complexity. A person who does not fit social expectations may be misunderstood, but being misunderstood does not automatically make them good. Wednesday herself demonstrates this. She can be sympathetic and difficult, loyal and manipulative, protective and cruel, intelligent and emotionally inexperienced. Her complexity is what makes her interesting, and the supporting characters benefit from similar treatment. Enid is not simply the cheerful friend. She has her own fears, desires and frustrations. Morticia is not simply the elegant mother. She has her own relationship with power, identity and motherhood. Gomez is not simply the enthusiastic father. He has his own history and vulnerabilities. Even the authority figures and antagonists can be understood through their motivations. This creates a world where character choices matter more than simple labels. The supernatural setting makes these conflicts more dramatic, but the emotional principles remain human. Another major strength of Season 2 is its ability to use humor to reveal character. Wednesday's jokes are rarely random. They reveal her worldview. When she responds to something frightening with fascination, the audience learns how different her emotional reactions are. When she makes an insensitive remark, the audience sees how little she understands conventional social boundaries. When she says something unexpectedly protective, the contrast becomes funny because it contradicts her established persona. Enid's reactions make these moments even stronger because she responds as a normal teenager might. The humor therefore becomes a form of character development. Instead of stopping the story for a joke, the show uses personality to create humor naturally. This is important in a season that becomes darker because comedy provides emotional balance without destroying the atmosphere. The Addams family contributes heavily to this tonal balance. Their casual relationship with death and danger creates a strange form of normality. What would be horrifying to another family may be a perfectly ordinary conversation for the Addamses. This allows the series to explore dark themes without becoming excessively grim. The family treats darkness as part of life, which makes Wednesday's worldview feel less like a rebellious phase and more like a genuine part of her identity. Yet the series also shows that darkness does not prevent love. The Addams family may be macabre, but their loyalty is strong. This is one of the reasons Wednesday's emotional development feels believable. She comes from a family where love is already present, she simply expresses it differently. Her challenge at Nevermore is learning that relationships outside the family can also become meaningful. Enid is the clearest example because she does not share Wednesday's family background, yet she manages to become important to her. That demonstrates that Wednesday can form chosen relationships as well as inherited ones. This is a significant step toward adulthood because adolescence often involves expanding identity beyond family. Friends become increasingly important, and chosen communities can become as meaningful as biological relationships. Nevermore represents that chosen community. The second season strengthens it by giving Wednesday more history and responsibility within the school. She is not simply attending anymore, she is participating in the life of the institution. That participation creates consequences. Her actions affect others. Her investigations can put people in danger. Her decisions can change relationships. This makes her more accountable. In the first season, being reckless could sometimes be framed as part of her charm because she was discovering the environment. In Season 2, the audience understands more clearly that her choices have consequences for people who trust her. This creates a more mature version of the character. She can still take extreme risks, but the stakes are higher because other people are now connected to her. That is another reason her friendship with Enid matters. Friendship creates responsibility. If you care about someone, you have to consider how your actions affect them. Wednesday's instinct is often to act alone because that gives her maximum control, but acting alone can put others at risk. Learning when to involve other people becomes part of her growth. This does not mean she suddenly becomes a team player. She remains independent, but she becomes more capable of recognizing that cooperation can be strategically useful and emotionally meaningful. The difference is subtle but important. Wednesday does not abandon independence. She learns how to use connection without surrendering autonomy. The larger supernatural mystery provides a perfect environment for this lesson because some threats cannot be solved by one person. Wednesday may be the smartest investigator, but she cannot be everywhere at once. She needs information from others. She needs people who can reach places she cannot. She needs allies with abilities different from her own. This practical necessity gradually reinforces the emotional lesson. Relationships are not simply emotional burdens, they can expand what a person is capable of doing. Enid's abilities, family connections and other characters' skills can complement Wednesday's intelligence. The group becomes stronger because their differences are useful. This is another way the series communicates its theme of belonging. Difference does not have to divide people. It can make a community stronger when everyone is allowed to contribute something unique. Wednesday's greatest strength is her intelligence, but that does not make other people's strengths irrelevant. Learning this does not diminish her. It makes her a better investigator and a more complete person. Season 2's expanded cast therefore serves a thematic purpose beyond adding more faces. Each character can represent a different way of responding to danger, identity and relationships. Wednesday's challenge is learning to work within that diversity. The school itself becomes a miniature society where different outsiders have different values. Some want acceptance from the wider world. Others want separation. Some embrace their supernatural abilities. Others fear them. Some see Nevermore as a sanctuary. Others see it as a place of power and conflict. Wednesday's position within this debate is complicated because she does not easily commit to any group identity. She is an individualist, but she also benefits from the community. This contradiction gives her character ongoing tension. She wants the freedom to do whatever she wants, but she also wants the people she cares about to remain safe. Those goals can conflict. Sometimes protecting a community requires accepting limits. Sometimes independence requires cooperation. Wednesday has to learn how to navigate that tension. This is where the season's institutional storyline becomes emotionally meaningful. Principal Dort and the school's leadership represent the question of who gets to make decisions for a community. Wednesday naturally resists being controlled, but the story asks whether she can participate in a system without immediately trying to dismantle it. Her answer is complicated because her suspicion is often justified. Nevermore has secrets, and authority figures can hide information. But suspicion without cooperation can become destructive. The season therefore challenges her to find a balance between skepticism and trust. This is not a lesson she learns instantly. It is an ongoing process. The same is true of her relationships. She may trust someone in one situation and doubt them in another. She may forgive someone without forgetting what happened. She may care about someone while still keeping emotional distance. These contradictions make her relationships more realistic. The show does not need every relationship to become simple. In fact, simplicity would undermine the character. Wednesday is compelling because she does not experience relationships in ordinary ways. She can care and resent someone simultaneously. She can be grateful and irritated at the same time. She can want someone nearby and still